So if we begin with Ellen White commentary, the heading Ellen White's commentary. So we've gone through the verses. We took a few little lessons out of there. With the stone and what Jacob does with the stone. He makes the most of what he has. And God meets him in that place. He gives him a dream. He gives him a glimpse of the plan of salvation. And Jacob takes that now. Even though he doesn't fully, I think Ellen White talks about it, he doesn't really fully understand what he sees. But what he sees, he takes hold of. And he makes the most of it. And we see a change of mood. We see kind of it's like he's accepted God now. He's fully embraced God at this moment. And he continues on his journey. So let's read what Ellen White has to say. PP 183.1. Threatened with death by the wrath of Esau, Jacob went out from his father's home a fugitive, but he carried with him the father's blessings. Isaac had renewed to him the covenant promise, and had bidden him as its inheritor to seek a wife of his mother's family in Mesopotamia. Yet it was a deeply troubled heart that Jacob set out on his lonely journey. With only his staff in his hand, he must travel hundreds of miles through a country inhabited by wild, roving tribes. In his remorse and timidity, he sought to avoid men, lest he should be traced by his angry brother. He feared that he had lost forever the blessings that God had purposed to give him, and Satan was at hand to press temptations upon him. So what we have here, it's like a mini kind of a taster of like the time of trouble of what's to come. So like what Satan does all the time, every time you're in a moment of darkness. We could use Moses as an example. When he was in the wilderness for 40 years, it was a trying experience where Satan was at hand pressing his temptations upon Moses, but at the same time we're seeing God working. Like when Jesus was in the wilderness, he was face to face with Satan. When he was in Gethsemane, it was like again he was kind of face to face with Satan because he was surrounded by darkness. Who else can I use as an example? Jesus on the cross, surrounded by darkness, more or less kind of face to face with Satan, having to deal with something on his own. It's in a situation where you're on your own and you have to face that darkness. Basically, and Jacob's here at Bethel. And what is he thinking? What's the last sentence? What does he fear? The thing he's been fighting for, wrestling for all his life up until this moment, the thing that is from the womb, well, not from the womb, but from childhood, he's been wrestling for something. And now what does he fear? Let's just read the last sentence.
The blessing. He feared that he had lost blessing.
Yeah, so did they believe he lost it? Or what's the difference between believing he lost it and fearing he lost it?
I don't think he wholly believed that he had lost it. He feared that he may have lost it. Meaning, it's just the fear that's coming. The fear is permeating his belief. Although behind that fear he did believe that he had it, but he feared, because of the fear, he feared that he had lost it.
Is it because of, what he's done? His sin. Because of his sin, he feared that, okay, this is lost forever. It says she said he feared that he lost it forever. So that means that's it. That opportunity, that purpose is over. You're out a fugitive, alone. You're troubled and you fear that, okay, what was given to me now, it's gone forever. He feared that what God purposed to give him was gone. So God changed his mind because of his sin.
It's almost like he fears his probation's closed.
Yeah, and so with that fear, or that mindset, Satan now has an advantage. He has access now to kind of press that temptation even stronger.
Cut him off.
Yeah, to cut him off. And he's in the right place for Satan because he's alone. He's a fugitive. He's sinned. He's got no support no more. He hasn't got his mom to support him. You know. And now he's all alone. Never been in this place before. Never been alone. He's gone through a new experience, and now Satan's at hand to press his temptation. That he's telling him, okay, you're lost, man. The blessing, what you just been blessed with, that's gone. That was a waste of time. It's gone because you've sinned. You're lost and you're undone. Basically, and that's what Satan does in that. Like he's trying to do it to Christ. He's trying to do it to Elijah, and so on. So let's see what happens. So 183.2. The evening of the second day found him far away from his brother's tents. He felt that he was an outcast, and he knew that all this trouble had been brought upon him by his own wrong course. The darkness of despair pressed upon his soul, and he hardly dared to pray. But he was so utterly lonely that he felt the need of protection from God as he had never felt it before. With weeping and deep humiliation, he confessed his sin and entreated for some evidence that he was not utterly forsaken. Still his burdened heart found no relief. He had lost all confidence in himself, and he feared that the God of his fathers had cast him off. So before we go into this, it's important it's why it's important to actually understand who God is, because a false representation of God or a false understanding of God will lead you down the wrong paths. Having false beliefs, false understanding, reading things wrong will lead you down to the wrong path. So he feared that he lost the blessing. So he's already been taught that the blessing was for him from his mom. So how did he read that when he done something wrong or made a mistake? So okay, if I do something wrong, that means I may lose this blessing. And that's how some people read. Because of this sin, God's not going to bless me now because I've committed this sin or done this mistake. And it's so big. So we begin to read God in the wrong way, in a distorted way. That God only blesses if you only do good things. It's like works. Let me do all these works, then God will bless me. It's kind of a conservative way of thinking. In Jacob, I'm not saying to me it seems like he's thinking down those lines that, okay, he's done this big sin, he's an outcast. So that means I fear I've lost a blessing. So where did he develop this faulty thinking? If the blessing, God said this is for you anyway, how did he develop this faulty thinking? I'm asking that because conservatism has made us think faulty. It's a faulty way of thinking, and it's not biblical.
What exactly is the faulty way of thinking that if we do something wrong, we cast?
Emma, can you speak up, please?
Oh, sorry, I'm saying, what exactly is the faulty way of thinking that Leon's pointing out? Is it the fact that when we do something wrong, we're lost?
Yeah, like for example,
You can never come back again.
Never come back again. You've lost the blessing forever.
yeah,
So true.
if you're not doing this right, or if you're not living this way, that means you're not right with God. You have to be doing this to be right with God. If you're not, for example, if you're not dressing a certain way, if you're not dressing in black, or if you're not, I don't
Wearing
know,
long dresses.
or
Yeah.
if you're wearing a short dress, if you eat this way, or if you eat that, or if you're not doing this type of work, if you're not always witnessing, or if you're not always praying before you eat, or if you forget to pray before you eat, you've sinned. Or if you don't pray an hour when Sabbath comes. I grew up like that.
So you have a set of rules that if you don't obey them,
Yeah.
you're lost and undone.
Basically, yes.
But do you think go on.
So legally, it's like following the rules more than actually knowing who God is.
Yes.
Yeah, it's like if you break the rule, that means it's affected you in your walk with God. That's how you view it. And you get troubled by it. You get troubled thoughts. Does that make
Wow.
sense?
We just have so much to unlearn, so
Baggage.
much to figure out in our heads.
Is that we've got a rule book?
But part of that is
Yeah,
because
exactly.
God says if you do this, you'll be blessed. If you don't do this, you get cursed. And that's the whole way we process it. And a part of it's
Yeah.
because we've read the way He's put that. So we think we have biblical backing for that position. That's why.
And I think we had it for like a lot of conservative views what we've held on to. And they won't say it. Spirit of prophecy says it.
So
we need
I
to do
think,
this, we need to do that.
I think we still approach it like children, perhaps. Is that why? Because these rules are given in Leviticus and Deuteronomy. You've got all this, the blessings and the cursings. If you're obedient, you get the rain. If you're not obedient, you don't get the rain. There's a direct consequence if you're not obedient. So whatever obedience looks like, if you're not obedient, you're going to suffer.
And it's how, remember, he's writing to them. So he has different expectations of different people in different dispensations.
He expects you to grow.
So we are holding on to the expectations he had for the Israelites back in them days and applying it to us, all same expectations. But it doesn't require certain things of us in our time. This is why we need to think like adults. We're not children anymore. And God's trying to teach us. We are adults now. Stop thinking like a child. That's why He's feeding us adult things. And probably, what's the name? Jacob here was probably a child still. In his mind. Until he's an adult, until he can really wrestle with God at Jabbok.
Because it says he hasn't got an experience with God, doesn't it? So
Yeah.
what's he thinking in the wrong way? He's thinking in a conservative mindset, and he's done this wrong thing now, and it's impossible to go back.
Mm.
It's pretty bad what he's done, though. We'd agree.
It's bad, yeah.
But he doesn't understand the character of God and how He deals with our remorse and our sin.
Mm.
But it's not like set in stone, and I think that's what we think it is, always set in stone.
And the same expectation we have of ourselves we put on others. So I've sinned because I ate the cake or whatever it was, and you eat the cake, therefore you're a sinner.
Yeah.
And the problem with that is the
Yeah,
whole mindset
definitely.
of contamination and judgment just projects onto them, and they're lost and undone. And heresy's dangerous, so I can't associate with you because you're dangerous now, because you're a heretic. So all that goes along with that baggage. It puts up a wall of partition. And it's frightening. It's really frightening.
Yeah. So
He's got a partition between him and God here now.
yeah, that's what he's got, yeah.
Because
That's how it seems. So it says, it's the second day, he's far away from his father's tents. So he felt he was an outcast. So he felt, okay, I'm an outcast. And he knew that all the trouble, what's come upon him, was brought upon by his own course of actions. So he knew this trouble came upon him. So this is kind of a mini time of trouble. So he knows he's the cause of this trouble. Yeah. So now he's in despair, he's in darkness. And what he can't pray. He hardly dares to pray. So it's so bad, you hardly dare to pray. It's just one of those moments where things are just too much for you.
But you're so unworthy you can't approach God. You can't, because you're such a sinner. You're so lost and undone.
And that's how I was feeling.
Why is He going to hear your prayer?
Don't we become like the Pharisees and very legalistic about everything?
Yes. Yeah, like the Jews of all the restrictions they placed on the Sabbath and all the restrictions that they couldn't possibly keep. You either give up and you leave.
And
So
if you
it's
struggle,
impossible.
and I think this is what happens, you just go into darkness. Like, I can't do it. I'm depressed now because it's just too much, and I'm overwhelmed with all these rules,
Years
and
ago,
I have to keep them.
yeah,
You
they did studies on why Adventists leave Adventism, and it was never because they didn't accept the truth. It's because they thought they weren't good enough to do it. They just thought, forget this, can't do it.
Yeah, there's a lot of Adventists. What that happens to a lot of people.
Yeah.
Sorry, Emma, can you
Yes.
slow down and speak up, please?
Oh, sorry, I'm right here by the mic. I don't know why it's not picking me up. Am I speaking quieter than you, Leon? No, I'm saying I don't know what I said.
You said about Adventism.
Yeah, I think years ago they did studies why people leave Adventism, and it isn't because they don't agree that it's the truth. They accept it's the truth, but they don't think they're good enough to keep it. They can't keep it, so they get overwhelmed and they just leave because it's too difficult.
Yeah.
So you either do that, or you carry on with a conservative mindset which says, we'll get there one day, I'll be good enough one day if I keep trying hard enough. And that doesn't work either.
Wow. Yeah, I can understand now.
So it hardly dares to pray. So is in a time period where it feels like it can't pray. Maybe because what's pressed upon him. Remember, Satan's at hand now, pressing his temptations upon Jacob. It's similar with Christ in the garden. But Jesus has a different approach, where Jacob, he feels like he can't pray. I know those moments. But he was so utterly lonely that he felt the need of protection, as he never had felt before. So he's in this place now, he's never been here before. It's a new experience. He doesn't feel safe. He's just alone. He's alone. God is there, but he doesn't realize, he doesn't acknowledge that God is there. So this is a time where God is there, but he knew it not. When he wakes up at the dream, he says, God was in this place and I knew it not. So while he's going through this darkness and despair and I can't even pray to God. So that's the thing, like, you think, when you're in those moments, you feel like God is not even there with you, and because you're not praying, God's not there with you. But we realize that God was there with Jacob. Here in Jacob, it's just not manifesting in a way that Jacob wanted him to manifest himself. So it wants some evidence. He's weeping, he's in humiliation, he's confessing his sin. So he knows what he's done, he's confessing it. He's trying to make himself right with God. He's repenting, and he wants evidence. So if he's believing he's forsaken, and he wants evidence that he's not forsaken. He's probably asking, my God, why have you forsaken me? So he wants that evidence that he's not forsaken. So he's burdened, and there's no relief. There's no relief. God gives him no relief. Basically, he leaves him. He fears that God has cast him off. Because of his experience with his parents. He's cast away. He's an outcast. Now he feels that his own Father in heaven has cast him off. So sometimes our experiences with human beings could, is project the right word to, can project the way we see God or think God is dealing with us.
That's the parable, yeah.
This is what I'm saying. It's important that we have good human relationships, because then it helps us to understand who God is and what God's doing. Because now it feels he's cast away. Now he's cast out from his parents' home. The parents he was supposed to be as God, but he went through a faulty parable all his life. He's grown up in a faulty parable. His mom and dad are not in harmony. They're not in unity. They're not attuned. His mother's manipulating the children, manipulating the husband, and Jacob takes this on. And now he's been cast away because of what he's done. Which was kind of influenced by his mom as well. And now it feels like I'm alone now. That means God, my parents have forsaken me. Well, not forsaken me, but they've cast me out because I can't stay there. Well, his mom cast me out. His mom told me to go, basically. But he had to go because of the threat of Esau. So his mom said go. But now it feels like God is not with him because of his sin. Because his sin's so bad, he couldn't stay in his home. And so his sin's so bad, even maybe my Father in heaven's forsaken me as well. Because of this sin. This is what my sin does. It separates me from people. It's separated from his human relationships, his family. Now it feels, because of that sin, that same sin, I'm separated from God. And that's how we can think. Because my dad's treating me like this, that means that's the way I see the Father. Because now I'm alone, I'm getting no relief. There's no who is here. It's like my daddy's never there for me. It's like my mom never there for me. God's never there for me. That's how I feel. And that's how people can reason, probably like in depression, in low moments. It's that faulty way of thinking. Our experience we tend to view God how we viewed our parents or people, you know, because of our bad experiences. So Jacob's here, his burden is praying, you know. Well, first he said he hardly dares to pray, but when he does pray, he confesses his sin, but he wants evidence that he's not forsaken, and he's not getting it. It's just God's not answering him, basically. There's no relief. God leaves him. So he's left. So 183.3. And it's a good thing to note that actually, like, sometimes you think God's not answering my prayer. You know, I'm depressed, I'm low, and you know, where are you, God? And we see here that Jacob had no relief.
I think the good thing that Jacob did was he lost confidence in himself. And I think that's a good thing in a way, because now he's just got to kind of depend on God more. Because sometimes when we have too much confidence in ourselves, it's like we tend to do things our way.
Yeah. But God did not forsake Jacob. His mercy still extended to his erring, distrustful servants. The Lord compassionately revealed just what Jacob needed, a saviour. He had sinned, but his heart was filled with gratitude as he saw revealed a way by which he could be restored to the favour of God. Wearied with his journey, the wanderer lay down upon the ground with a stone for his pillow. So just before, you know, he gets the stone for his pillow, this is what he's going through, you know, praying, finding no relief, thinking he's forsaken, and wanting that, he just wants that assurance that he's right with God, or that God's with him. So he's praying for that assurance, you know, but his burden is just getting no relief, basically. So he says, okay, I'm just going to go to sleep. Let me just go to sleep. Because there's no relief. What else can I do? All I can do now is to sleep. So he gets the stone for his pillow. As he slept, he beheld a ladder, bright and shining, whose base rested upon the earth, while the top reached to heaven. Upon this ladder angels were ascending and descending. Above it was the Lord of glory, and from the heavens his voice was heard. I am the Lord God of Abraham thy father, and the God of Isaac. So the Lord reveals who he is to him in a dream. The land wherein that he lay as an exile and fugitive was promised to him and to his posterity with the assurance, in thee and in thy seed shall all the families of the earth be blessed. This promise had been given to Abraham and to Isaac, and now it was renewed to Jacob. Then what God does now to his present condition. So he gives him the promise, you know, he tells him, okay, I am God. He reveals himself, he makes himself known that he's with you. He affirms that the blessing that you feared that was gone, the promise that you feared that was gone forever, is still there. So stop thinking that way. Stop with that faulty thinking, because I'm still here working with you. You know. So then, in special regard to his present loneliness and distress, the words of comfort and encouragement were spoken. Behold, I am with thee, and will keep thee in all places whither thou goest, and will bring thee again into this land, for I will not leave thee until I have done that which I have spoken to thee of. So God gave him what he needed for his present condition, you know, his distress and his loneliness. He's never been in this experience before, and he didn't really have experimental knowledge with God. So all he needed is just that encouragement, basically. And God gave him, basically God kind of gave him what he should have known. You know, God had to tell him, God had to remind him that I'm with you, and wherever you go, you know, when you make more mistakes in the future, you know, when you continue your work of deception, you know, and trickery, you know, I'm still with you. You just gotta work out. I just gotta work out your sin. I just gotta work. I'm still working with you in whatever you're doing, and you're gonna come back. I'm gonna be with you still, even though you may face some trials. You may go through some experiences, some trying experiences, but I'm still with you. God doesn't tell him the details. God just says, "I'm gonna be with you." Basically, Jacob doesn't know what he's gonna get himself into, but God says, "Just be assured that I'm with you." So maybe Jacob thought he wouldn't go through anything from this point. He'd be safe, he'd be fine. But that's not how God operates. You know, sometimes God doesn't give you the details. He just tells you, "I'm going to be with you." You may go through, you may go to hell and back or wherever it may be. You may go through your darkest moments, but just believe what I'm saying now. I'm with you. Yeah. So Jacob should have known this from before this experience. He should have been taught this. He should have believed. He should have had this belief. But because of his bad upbringing, you know, he lost that belief. You know, he lost it. He didn't think that God was with him because of his sin. So is how he read, I don't know, I can't say how he read the scripture, but how he read or how he understood God, that God wasn't with him because of his sin. But God's saying, "I'm with you, I've been with you." So who told you that I'm not with you now? Where did you get that belief, that mindset? You know, so what God is showing us is that we have to unlearn and relearn what we've believed, what we've been taught, how we've been growing up in a certain way. We have to unlearn, relearn many things and let go of many things. So right now Jacob's not ready here to kind of let go of certain things, certain habits right now, because he's not ready for it. This is when we get to Jabbok, he really has to confront so many things that he's been holding on to, and it's not easy to let go, but he has to face. That's when he faces it, when he's a full adult, you know. But now he's kind of young in his experience, even though he's probably 77 years old here, but he's young in his experience. This is where God can only give him as much as what he can bear.
So he was 77 when he was in Bethel, at Bethel.
Apart around that age, I would say. I can't.
And then 20 years later, he was probably about 90 something.
Something like that, yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. So Emma, you want to read this next paragraph?
And so he, so then after that, Joseph comes along with, you know, and they sell him out, and so wow, he went to Egypt years later after that.
Yeah.
Wow. But not old like we see it, because those days they were youngish at 77 or 90 or.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah. Shall I read the next one?
Yeah.
As Jacob pursued his journey, a stranger in a strange land, he sadly pondered the events which had transpired as the result of his own transgression. At night he lay down to sleep with the canopy of heaven as a covering, the earth his bed and a stone his pillow. A compassionate God, who ever pitieth the woes of men, saw the lonely fugitive, troubled and perplexed, fearing that God had forsaken him because of his injustice, deception and falsehood. In a vision of the night the Lord manifested himself to Jacob. He saw a ladder, the base resting upon the earth, the top round reaching into the highest heaven, even to the throne of God. The Lord himself, enshrouded in light, stood above the top of the ladder, and angels were ascending and descending upon it.
Oh, you know, read the next one, yeah.
As Jacob gazed with wonder upon the scene, the voice of God was heard, saying, I am the Lord God of Abraham thy father, and the God of Isaac, and behold, I am with thee, and will keep thee in all places whither thou goest, and will bring thee again into this land, for I will not leave thee until I have done that which I have spoken to thee of. Jacob awakened from his dream and exclaimed in solemn awe, "Surely the Lord is in this place, and I knew it not." He looked about as if to again catch a glimpse of the heavenly messengers, but above him was only the blue, star-gemmed firmament. His head was still resting upon the rocky pillow. The ladder was gone, and the angels were no longer to be seen, but the voice of God was still echoing in his ears. With the promise now to him so precious, he felt indeed that angels of God, although unseen, peopled the place, that God was looking down upon him with compassion and love. Filled with holy awe and amazement, he involuntarily exclaimed, "How dreadful is this place! This is none other but the house of God, and this the gate of heaven."
So it comes at his moment of distress now, when he just lays down to rest, and God meets him where he's at, basically in his own time. So God meets him in God's own way, in his own time, and he gives him just what he needs. And then Jacob wakes up and realizes, wow, God was here with me in this experience, and I knew it not. So we felt that, basically felt the love of God there and what God had done for him. There's something else I want to bring.
Hello?
Hello? So he knew about his injustice and his deception and his falsehood, what he committed. But right here, he doesn't really know the depths of it. It's his character, but he knows his behavior, what he's done. So God doesn't really deal with that right now. That root is still there in him. This is why he still continues in his falsehood from this point. Yeah. So PP 184.1. The Lord knew the evil influences that would surround Jacob, and the perils to which he would be exposed. In mercy, he opened up the future. So the Lord knew the evil influences that would surround Jacob, and the perils to which he would be exposed. In mercy, he opened up the future before the repentant fugitive, that he might understand the divine purpose with reference to himself, and be prepared to resist the temptations that will surely come to him when alone amid idolaters and scheming men. There would be ever before him the high standard at which he must aim, and the knowledge that through him the purpose of God was reaching its accomplishment would constantly prompt him to faithfulness. So let's speak about that.
Remains he's got to remember.
So
Not forget what God did for him.
yeah. So in this vision, in this dream, the Lord opened up the future before Jacob. So the Jacob's in like the future. That you might understand the divine purposes, what that reference to himself. So I'm not fully aware what he's seen. But God showed him what he needs to see to be prepared to resist temptations that surely will come to him alone, amongst idolaters and scheming men. I'm thinking about Laban. So I don't know if Jacob took this on board, because it ended up being deceived anyway.
Did he? I don't think he showed him details. I think he probably showed him, because it says he opened up the future that he might understand the divine purpose with reference to himself. So I think he probably showed him, you're still going to get the birthright blessing, you're still going to have the promised seed, and you're going to come back to the land. So he gave him the overall promise again. He said, look, I'm still going to do this for you. but he doesn't give him any details. He doesn't know how long it's going to take. He doesn't know what it's going to look like you said. So it's just a bit like telling us you're the 144,000, but you've got no idea what you're going to go through yet.
You don't know how you're going to get there.
How you're going to get there, what it feels like. It doesn't feel like you are at some points. It's like, it's just by faith you're going to have to believe He's giving you that promise.
So just know
so
you're going to get there. You're going to get there, but I'm not going to show you how you get in there. You may be through the waters.
Yeah.
You might be through the valley of the shadow of death. You know, just
fear
no evil.
You're going to die, and it's contrary to the purpose. The whole plan is going up the creek, but he still assured you that that's going to be. I think he showed him Christ, didn't he? He showed him Christ at the top of the ladder, but maybe he showed him his part in that he would still be the father of Christ ultimately. You know, in the generations, that he still would have that birthright promise.
And I think maybe if he did show him like the deception with Laban and the wives, maybe Jacob say, okay, no, I'm sorry.
Yeah.
And it's the same with us. Even with the movement, like even in our personal lives, like when we first joined church, I know there's experiences where we thought, if I had known this, I wouldn't have gone down this path. If I'd known I would end up in this situation, or you know, in this environment, maybe I would have chose a different path. If I knew I would be studying this type of message, or I had to give up this because of this message say so, I'm not coming. I'm not joining. And so God has to work with us step by step as a child, you know. And then when we get older, when we're able to manage more truths, God shows us, okay, it's time to give up what you've once held on to.
But all your choices would have been different, and you wouldn't have learned what you were meant to learn.
Yeah.
So if I'm like, for instance, if 20 years ago he said, I'm going to tell you in 20 years you don't have to wear a skirt, there's no way that I'd have put the skirt on in the first place, and I'm not going to go and teach people to wear the skirt, and I'm not going to have that concept of God. And so, but he has to take us through that learning curve, I think, or at least he can only work with us where we are. And he's not going to show us in advance, just like he's not going to tell us in advance there is no Sunday law, because no one would join the movement. It's the same concept.
Yeah, from 1899.
Yeah.
1989. Basically, yeah. So Jacob learns he's a deceiver in the fullest at Jabbok, not now. So he has to continue in his experience to learn from his experience as well.
He's not ready. And
then when he's ready, he has to confront it, basically. You know, so God doesn't tell it. God says you're gonna go to this place and you're gonna return, but God doesn't tell him the small print.
And I think that's mercy, and we don't see it as mercy. We think, why do we have to go through all that? But at the same time, what it does is it shows us that God is not a God of zapping, that he doesn't just give you a brain transplant and force you to be a certain way or see a certain way. Because if he did tell you those things at the beginning, you wouldn't process it properly. You're not ready to hear it, and it would be forced upon you in a way that would eventually you would not stand for yourself on it, because you've not learned it yourself. It's like you can't force children to learn things. They have to learn it themselves. You can give them so much information, but they still have to make choice and learn it themselves. And it's the same with us. That in his mercy he wants us to grow, he wants us to reason, he wants us to use common sense, he wants us to, you know.
And there's always something to learn. There's always in every experience, like in Jacob's experience, you know, when he's down low and distressed, he learned something from that experience. It's the same with Elijah when he was depressed. You know, he wanted to die. You know, he learned from that experience, and it's usually we put ourselves into these situations because our perspective, our beliefs, our false beliefs, you know, our expectations and things like that. It's down to how we think, what we believe, what we hold on to, and if it's not working out the way we want it to work out, you know, we can bring these moments upon ourselves. You know, so it's really understanding who you are, and sometimes it takes years. It takes a period of time. For Jacob, it took like a couple of years.
A couple.
Yeah.
To be generous, but it's interesting.
I think it's not so much like understanding who we are, but understanding who God is, so that we can understand who we are. So it's like understanding who God is first, because
no, I don't.
No, we went through this over week.
No, I still can't get that. It's because how else are we going to understand who we are if we don't understand who God is?
how are we going to understand who we are if we don't understand who God is?
God is here because we understand more and more that God is love. And when we see that God is love, we see the mercies that he has towards us. And then we begin to change and to see how God sees us.
So, yeah, we went through this a couple of weeks ago. So,
Yeah, because I mean, if that, and sorry,
we have because what I'm saying is because of how we've been taught, how we've been how we've been growing up, what we've seen of human beings, it reflects on how we view God. So that's what I'm saying. So we have these expectations of God. So I don't know if it's a good example, but before we used to think God is a sexist God, and we thought that is love. A woman should be a servant to the man. A woman should do this. A woman should do that. A man should. This is a man's role, and we thought we viewed that all under the name of love. And now we're looking into that now, and we're realizing what we thought was love is not love. You know, what we thought was love is sexist. What we thought was love was racism.
But how do we know that? Through God only?
No, through man.
Through humans. Through human relationships.
So for 20 years, or however long it is we've been walking with God, we thought that if we just look at God enough, we'll understand what he's like. And we've been looking at God for 20 years, and we realise, actually, we don't know what he's like. It's not helped us. And that one of the reasons is because we've looked at human beings who've showed us a certain picture of God. And that's the primary reason, I guess. We've spent a lot of time with conservative Adventists who have got the wrong perspective of God and have schooled us in the wrong perspective of God. And then we have reflected that to others. And so we have been taught through human beings. And I think we deny that fact.
Don't those human beings look at the way God sees us first and then brings their view over to us?
Yes, and that's why it's faulty, because they thought they could do that as well, and they've looked at it through their eyes with their perspective and imprinted on God something he's not, and then we've just got it from them, and we thought we could go to God.
Their conclusion. How do they come to their conclusion?
Because they've misunderstood the parable.
Yes, so isn't it still misunderstanding who God is?
Yes, but it's because of the way you see human beings. And so what they've done is we've trusted the wrong human beings, I think. I mean, I'm still trying to process the whole concept myself, because I think I'm just like you, I'm struggling.
I still can't figure out how you could not understand, I mean, the way God is so compassionate to us. That's how we should be compassionate to each other.
And that's a question.
Right, so the question is, how did you learn that now? How have your eyes been opened in this dispensation that God is not how you thought he was?
Through the leaders, or through humans.
Through human beings.
Yeah, but humans saw that compassion because they went a little bit deeper into all God gave it to them.
So,
no, I don't think they did.
Let me bring it back to Jacob. Let's bring it back to Jacob. So, did Jacob know God?
Did what?
Did Jacob know God?
Not really. No.
Not really.
Yeah.
Where did he learn about God?
At Bethel.
Just at Bethel?
At Jabbok.
Not before?
Yeah, he did, but his perspective was a little bit different.
So when did he begin to learn about God? Let me ask that question.
I think at Jabbok.
In his 90s?
No,
when did he first begin to learn? So think about, when did he begin to learn about God?
When he was small, when he was a young boy.
Who was that by?
By his parents.
So what was he seeing? What was he taking in?
He was seeing probably God through the eyes of his parents.
So he's saying he's seeing God through the eyes of his parents. So what was his parents like?
Well, as we see at that time that they were teaching Jacob, very dysfunctional, I would say.
And what was the parents' relationship like?
Not overly, like I said, very dysfunctional. I mean, they didn't view things in the right perspective, in the right way.
So that dysfunction leads Jacob to Jabbok, where he has to view that dysfunction and understand who he is and understand who God is. So he's seeing God in a dysfunctional way.
Yeah.
So is viewing a bad model of who God is. So he's taking that in, and this is what he thinks God is like. Okay, because he behaves. You behave by what you believe. Your beliefs drive your behaviors.
Yes.
So let me just use an example. He believed because Esau had the birthright. There's no other way of him getting a birthright. So he has to do things in his own strength. So that's what he believes. So he should know that he should understand that God will bring about the birthright in his own way. So it's been brought up to believe that he has to do things in his own strength, and that marks Jacob's character, doing things in his own strength.
Yeah.
So he's grown up with a faulty thinking or faulty understanding of who God is. So is God there to look at, to observe? Is learning God through humans? Faulty humans? Like faulty relationships?
So how did he learn about God if God didn't show him who exactly he was?
Through experience.
God showed Jacob who Jacob was, though.
God showed him
So
who he was.
Say that again, Emma.
I said God showed Jacob who Jacob was. And he did that through the experiences he went through. So he treats Esau in a certain way and he gets a certain reaction. And then his parents give a certain reaction. Now, whether that was the right thing to do to tell him to flee, I'm not even sure that was the right thing to do. They should have sat them both down and said, we're going to sort this out now. We've made a mistake. That was wrong what we did to favour Esau. Isaac should have confessed his sin. Rebecca should have come forward and said, I'm sorry as well. I've messed up big time. And because they didn't do that, they just carried on in the deception. They said, you flee, Jacob, go and get a wife, because she's still worried he's going to go and marry a heathen like Esau and let them down and ruin the plan. And, it's all, we see it from
No, she's not throwing that. She says that to manipulate Isaac.
A selfish perspective. Yeah, she's afraid for Jacob, though, isn't she?
She
says her heart will be broken if he marries a heathen.
She said that because she didn't want to tell Isaac that Esau wants to kill him. So she said that to him. So she manipulates Isaac.
That's true too, but I think she does have a fear that Jacob's going to leave her and marry a heathen. Do you think?
I think she used that argument to Isaac.
Yeah.
But she tells Jacob, she said, I fear Esau will kind of kill you, so go and hide and go and get a wife and come back when Esau's wrath is calmed down. Then she says something different to Isaac.
Yeah. So I don't know if it's really that she cares about Jacob, she does, but she cares about how she feels and how she's going to lose her son. And we reason from our own perspective. And so because of all that faulty thinking, he's on the run now and he's brought it on himself in that sense.
So with that, you know what, Jabbok then? What God is doing is showing Jacob who he is, because God doesn't tell him who I am. What God does is, what Christ does is, when he's wrestling, it appears in a way that in an unexpected way, and Jacob's wrestling now with Christ, and then because Jacob is holding on to something he doesn't realize, he's wrestling when he shouldn't be wrestling. Christ has to break him. He has to kind of bring him low to get him to realize who you're wrestling with. And then Jacob realizes who he's fighting with, a messenger from heaven. And then we have this kind of interview taking place. God asks Jacob, what is your name? So God is getting Jacob now to review his past. He's getting to understand who he is. Your name, you're a deceiver, supplanter. You've been fighting in your own strength to get your own way, to get what he wants. So God makes him review his past, and God makes him understand who he really is, basically. So that's what took place first. Who are you?
Okay, so you're saying that God shows the individual who they are.
Yes.
He compares and contrasts, does he?
I don't think he does. Actually, I think we say he does all this, but I think actually Jacob does this himself. So I think as as
Then
conservatives,
we see the mercies of God.
because he's recognized in all the human relationships he's had, all the things he's been through, he now has to stop and say, how did I get here? What did I do that was wrong? And he starts to see, as he looks back at his life, he starts to see the mistakes he's made. And it's only when we're willing to do that and we're willing to say, actually, I made a big mess of that, and now I'm broken and I'm absolutely nothing, that God can finally say, are you ready to listen now? I'll come and tell you who I am.
And he realizes God was not like what Jacob thought it was like when he made all these mistakes and doing things in his own strength. He realized, no, God was not pleased with that. That's not the work of God. That was all me in my own selfish ways, thinking that's acceptable. So there's something.
There's some part of Jacob that he realizes, who he is only through what God is showing him.
No.
Who he is.
No, God's showing Jacob who he is, who Jacob is.
Yeah, but I think it's because the experiences he's been through, his eyes are open. God allows him to go through these experiences with people and see who he is. And I think we want to put a lot on what God does, but I think lots of people in the world can do this. They can stop and think, actually, how did I get in this mess? And they look back and they see all the human relationships they've had and how they've interacted, and their viewpoint has been warped, and they recognise that they're lost and undone. And see, Jacob recognises that now when he sees the ladder. And when he gets there and he sees that ladder, he's comforted now. And now he takes the position that all I see is what is all there is. What I see is all there is. God loves me. Everything's fine. Everything's good. I'm in a good position. And now he goes back to, I'm okay now. I don't need anything else. And he carries on. He does the 20 years with Laban, all in his own strength, in a sense. And then he finally gets to Jabbok now, and he realizes, actually, I'm lost and undone, and I need you. And I really don't know who you are. And then God is able to talk to him again. And it's like this constant breaking, because we get to a place where we think, we've arrived now, we know everything, we're fine, we've got a good picture of God, we've got it all right, and everyone that doesn't agree with me is lost and undone. And that's a conservative mindset. So we've made an idol and we hold on to it. And then someone comes along and tries to tell us, actually, you've got a wrong view. And we say, I'm not listening to you because you're a man and I need to listen to God. And so that whole picture we have, that we have to get it from God, is so conservative and so damaging. Because it means we quote, cease ye from man whose breath is in his nostrils. So we don't respect or listen to any man, because we think we know who God is, and we interpret God how we want, and then we set that up as an idol. And when someone comes and tries to smash that idol, we say, don't touch my idol, this is my God, this is God, this is the God who I serve. You're a heretic to say that. So you cannot reason with someone who has that view that they can't learn anything from man. So Satan has done that on purpose to tip it on its head. So the very parable, the very way he was going to do it was to teach us through other men, to learn something through fellow human beings, that they can teach us something, that they're not all dangerous heretics, that they're not all wicked, is destroyed. So now he can't reach us through anyone, because how can he reach someone who has that position? How can you reach now a conservative Adventist with anything? Because you don't agree with them on some things, you're already in darkness and they're going to shut their ears. So now, because you're only a man, they have to go to God directly. God will show them what to do. And the only mechanism God has to help them is through human beings, and they've just cut it off. So they can't be helped. And it's tragic. And I think we're really trying to get out of that mindset. And it's hard. I totally understand where you're coming from. I'm really struggling to understand this, because it's fundamental to our whole concept of God. And so we become Adventist, we accept these truths, and we say, great, I know Ellen White, what she's saying now, I know what the Bible's saying, I've got 27 fundamental beliefs, I'm going to stand upon them, and someone's going to come along and try and challenge any of that, and we're going to say, no, you're a liberal, I don't want to listen, you've got the wrong view of God, you're in error, so you must be in darkness and led by Satan, so I can't listen to you, and I'm so sorry for you, but I've got the truth, and I'm going to tell you how it is. And if you don't listen to me, you're wrong and a heretic. And it's a Catholic, Muslim, right-wing perspective, monolithic perspective, which means you cannot be helped by other human beings, and then it leads you to, I cannot love other human beings who don't see it my way. And it's an absolute downward spiral. And as you start confronting conservatives now, you recognise that they're steeped in idolatry. Go on, sorry.
Yeah. So, with God, He just shows us who we really are.
What does God do?
I mean,
what did you say?
Yeah, I mean, no, I see, where does God come in then? If He just shows us who we are.
That's a good question. That is a very good question. I think what we've done is we've made God do all these things and he doesn't do it. He doesn't do all those things. And that's a scary concept for us because we think, actually, what does God do? And God doesn't force us to do anything. He doesn't put things in our head. He does, but he does it through human beings. And we've just set it up there that he's going to speak to us supernaturally. We've got this spiritualistic idea of God. And yes, we've got it from Bible and Spirit of Prophecy because angels come and talk to people and the Holy Spirit comes and talks to people. And the way it's worded in there says, God's going to do all these things for you. And we say, God, where are you? Talk to me like you do to them. So we want this voice, and then we want to, an impression, and we want, fleeces and all those things. And it's all spiritualistic. And he's saying, I think at the root of it, he's saying, use common sense. I've given you a brain. I've given you a brain like mine. I've given you choices. I've given you an ability to grow like Adam and Eve. You're not made zapped from the beginning in this way. That's kind of like robotic. God's going to come and tell you to do things. You're just going to do it. And I think our whole concept is warped. And I think it's really hard to unlearn that. But we're recognizing God isn't just going to supernaturally come in and tell you, don't do this, don't do that every 5 seconds. I don't think he does that. I think he's given you a brain. He says, make a choice. Use your intelligence I've given you. Use your common sense and make a choice. And then we start getting scared because we think, actually, where does God come into all that?
Okay.
So anyway, go on.
So
the one thing I wanted to comment on this paragraph here was that he might be prepared to resist the temptations that would surely come to him when alone amid idolaters and scheming men. And it's interesting, God wanted to prepare him to know what to do with scheming men. And Laban was a scheming man, but he doesn't seem to still know how to handle it. And we've projected onto that so we know how to function with worldlings. And I'm seeing now it's actually we need to know how to function with Christians, because the Christians are the worst idolaters and the worst schemers. And that's the worst opposition we're going to get. And so he wants us now to be prepared to resist those temptations we're going to get from professed Christians.
Yeah.
So anyway, go on.
So in the next paragraph, you want to read the next paragraph?
In the vision, the plan of redemption was presented to Jacob, not fully, but in such parts as were essential to him at that time. So it's part of it. The mystic ladder revealed to him in his dream was the same to which Christ referred in his conversation with Nathanael. Said he, ye shall see heaven open, and the angels of God ascending and descending upon the Son of Man. Up to the time of man's rebellion against the government of God, there had been free communion between God and man. But the sin of Adam and Eve separated earth from heaven, so that man could not have communion with his Maker. Yet the world was not left in solitary hopelessness. The ladder represents Jesus, the appointed medium of communication. Had he not with his own merits bridged the gulf that sin had made, the ministering angels could have held no communion with fallen man. Christ connects man in his weakness and helplessness with the source of infinite power.
And the next one.
All this was revealed to Jacob in his dream. Although his mind at once grasped a part of the revelation, its great and mysterious truths were the study of his lifetime, and unfolded to his understanding more and more.
So he was given a vision, and this vision was the plan of salvation was presented to Jacob. Not fully, but in such parts as was essential to him. So God gave him the truth for his time, for his dispensation. His dispensation,
as he could bear it,
because he wasn't ready for like further truths. It wasn't kind of relevant to him. So so his mind can only grasp part of it, part of the revelation, but what Jacob took was his study basically for a lifetime, and he kind of that understanding kind of unfolded throughout time. He started to understand more and more and more. So it's a progressive learning for Jacob, and I think also what Jacob learned is, I think it was probably passed down as well. He passed this knowledge down to his children, and then probably down to Moses as well. So when Moses writes Genesis, it's probably writing some things that was passed down to Jacob. Passed down from Jacob. Sorry, some of these truths. So probably some of the things what Moses is probably writing is what Jacob passed down from this vision, maybe. It's just a thought I had. So I know Jacob had things passed down to him as well, from Abraham, from Adam, from Noah, from Enoch. or this was passed down, because there's no writing back in these times. So a lot of it was word of mouth. So I think a lot of this was passed down all the way to Moses to kind of write. Well, Moses is in his time of, not time of trouble, but in his wilderness, is writing these things down in a, it forms the book of Genesis and the book of Job, and Moses is writing things down, what's been passed down. So yeah, with that, so yeah, Jacob's in a place where he's only receiving what he can bear at the time. And I don't know, maybe because of his experience and his faulty view of God and his wrong understanding of who he is himself, maybe he couldn't grasp. He probably would have been able to grasp more of the truths, what God was unfolding to him, but maybe his mind wasn't in the place to understand fully, So it kind of shows us why God gives us truth bit by bit in different dispensations. We just have an increase of knowledge in each dispensation to what we can bear. So what we're seeing here is, Jacob's life, the build up to Jacob's time of trouble, which is, we're in our time of trouble, but what brought us here? Why are we here? And it's what we're doing now is we're just looking at the internal, Jacob's life, his personal life, the same way we look at our personal life and how we view ourselves, but also we're looking at the external, what God is doing, what we cannot see. So what God's doing, Jacob cannot see. He only sees himself in his experience, but we're reading and we're seeing what God's doing on the outside, and it shows us in our experience what God was doing on the outside of our personal walks with Christ, and in the external, on the outside view of the movement, how God has led us, from 1989 to 2020, what God's done internally and externally, and how He's leading us step by step. So I think it's for us to know that when trials come, when darkness comes, we need to realize that, okay, there's something happening on the external, and we're not forsaken. Maybe we don't have much light yet, but light will come. And I think that's what God wants us to do with the message, with the lines, to know that like God gave Jacob a purpose. The purpose is, with this blessing, you're gonna, what's a blessing? You're gonna create a nation, basically. That's the outcome. So we got the lines. The lines teach us something. There's something at the end of the line. They say there's success at the end of the line. So that's the promise. So how you get there, it's not going to be roses. It's not going to be easy. But be assured that you will get there. You just gotta learn a few things along the way, and you're gonna have.
This is a line of success.
Yeah, you're gonna have more understanding. You're gonna have an increase of like what Jacob was getting. As I know it says, the truths unfolded to his understanding more and more. So yeah, he was having an increase of light in each dispensation of his life. So at Jabbok, he has an increase of knowledge. In Egypt, everywhere he goes, he has an increase of light, of knowledge. So it's the same with us. But sometimes the increase of light, sometimes there could be darkness surrounding it. Sometimes light comes out of darkness, but it's for us to know that in our personal walks, when we're in darkness, God is still working in the background, but we also know that Satan is also working as well. But there's something to learn about ourselves, why we are in this darkness. Darkness comes to different people at different times, in different shapes, in different forms, or whatever it may be. So it's just that assurance that God is working with the movement. It may appear that it's not, but the message tells us God is communicating with us through the message, which is the ladder, the line, and God is at the end of the line saying, you continue walking to me. I'm speaking to you through this message, through this ladder, and you need to listen. You need to hear what I have to say. I know you're grasping it bit by bit in parts, but the more you walk, the more you understand. Now you see in part, soon will be whole. Yeah, so continue with what you have in part, because it will unfold as you continue to walk in faith along this ladder. Then we'll meet face to face. Once you've seen in part, then you'll see face to face.
And even then it won't be the whole.
Yeah. But you're going to learn more and more about yourself. And the more you learn about yourself, you'll learn more and more about me. Yeah. So we're learning more about God really through the message. The message is showing us who we are and who God is, you know. And we see all this in the life of Jacob, you know. So the life of Jacob is it's a big study, you know. We are Jacob. That's how I see myself. I am Jacob, and the things what Jacob's done, I've done similar things, but now I look back and I understand why I've done those things, you know. And it's for me to correct these, you know, this way of living, these behaviors, these false beliefs, you know, this false mindset, and it's time to change. So with that, then, shall we close? Any final thoughts before we close?
So are you saying we couldn't hear God audibly speak to us?
Am I saying that?
No, Emma. Is that what you're saying? Like, it's only through humans that we can hear God, not through ourselves, not through an audible hearing.
I don't want to limit God, because he can do that if he wants to, but primarily it's through human beings. I'd say 99.9% of the time. But we think it's not that way around. We think he's going to speak to us directly in our prayer life, in our devotion, outside of human beings. And I think it's because we've cut off a huge chunk there.
We've limited God in how he speaks to us. It's just, let me use Elijah as an example before we close. When Elijah went into his depression, into his cave, you know, into his wandering in the wilderness, you know, wanting to die, you know, God left him to it. But what led in there was his false belief, you know, his wrong belief. I'm alone. No one's serving God. I'm here all alone, which is a wrong perspective. So his wrong perspective led into his depression. You know, I'm alone, and no one's responded. No one's gave their lives to God, and it's all a lie. It was all a misunderstanding. But it led him to his depression. You know, he got a threat from Jezebel. You know, after he stood before Ahab. You know, he stood before the king. The king was powerless. The king was weak, and now a threat from Jezebel drove him to sent him on the run. You know, and he just gave up, hopeless. And God leaves him. He walks for 40 days in the wilderness, and he finds himself in a cave of depression. And God says, "Why are you here?" And he makes him review his life. Why are you here? And come out the cave. Come out. And let me show you something. It shows him it makes a display. It manifests himself in a magnificent way. God manifests himself. First, the rocks start to rent, and there's an earthquake, and there's a storm, and there's all these mighty things taking place. God is manifesting himself, you know, in ways what Elijah expected, like at Mount Carmel when he prayed for fire, and fire came down from heaven and responded to God spoke through the fire. God said, "I am the true God." And then Elijah sees God responding again through fire. You know, the fire passes by Elijah, and then God says, "See all this? I'm not in it." But it was previously in it. But Elijah limited God in how God can save his people, how God can speak to his people. It limited him, and that limit view of God sent him to his depression, because when his expectations wasn't met, it was uncomfortable, because he limited who God was and how God operates. So God showed him, it's a still small voice. Listen to the small voice. I want you to hear. For you, learn to listen to the still small voice. And that's what Elijah didn't understand. Maybe he wasn't listening to that still small voice. He was expecting the voice to speak through the mighty miracles, the thunder, the rain, the fire, all these things. This is where we want to hear the voice of God. So we limit other places where God can speak. And then if we don't hear him speaking, there's a problem. You know, I'm leaving, there's depression, there's all types of issues, you know, because we limit God. We don't understand God. We don't understand how he speaks. So when God gives us a message, and we don't like it, we don't understand, this is God speaking, but you don't want to hear it because you're used to hearing God in a certain way. You're used to hearing nice, smooth things, maybe. You're used to hearing what you want to hear that makes you feel good. And God's saying, no, it's time to really hear me and understand where I'm speaking. And it's through the lines, it's through the message. So what I'm saying with the audible voice, we limit God, basically.
And it seems to me it's when he can't, is like his hands are tied, when he's at extremity position where man is not really willing to listen to any other man, and we've completely broken and lost and undone, that he can come in, that he steps in and starts to speak to people now, because they, for whatever reason, like Elijah, if he stood his ground, he could have reasoned with some of the Israelites and there would have been a great reformation, but he ran. And so now he's got no human beings around him. God has no other choice but to come to him and say, you know what are you doing here? It seems, I don't know, I think we've got to view it differently. I think we lean on the side of he's going to supernaturally speak to us through his word and with an audible voice, and that's the best way he leads us, and that's the only way really, and if humans help along the way, that's good. But I think it's totally not the right picture. So it's actually the other way around. It's mostly human beings, and if it's extreme position, he might talk to us directly, but because we're so faulty in our understanding, if he did do that, we just wouldn't interpret it right, we wouldn't see it right. It's frightening.
Right.
And so we've projected our own image on God.
It's really facing your fears then, is it?
I think so, yeah.
It's really understanding yourself, because when you more understand yourself, then you can really know what God's doing. You know, so when Elijah...
So is it really facing your fears? I never heard the reply back.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And understanding yourself, that's when you can really know more what God's doing. It's the same example with Jacob and with Elijah. When God corrected his perspective, then he was ready to hear God, what God was saying, and God gave him a work to do. You know, so understand yourself, then you can understand what God is doing. You can understand God more. You know, it's trying to understand God when you don't understand yourself. You know, you don't know why you behave the way you behave, the way you think the way you think. You know, so God can work with you more, I believe, when you really get to know who you are. You know, why do you have these habits? Why do you behave this way? Who told you to behave this way? Why do you believe this is the right way? Where did that belief come from? And that's what God does with Jacob. That's what he does with Elijah.
And that's parable teaching. He's using all your literal experiences to show you something about him.
Yeah.
So he's using all the things you feel and think, because you projected that onto God, and it's a big wall between you and him, because that's how you see him. And I just keep thinking it's like an animal, you know, a dog who is absolutely convinced that males are dangerous. So a man can't help that dog, because a man goes near that dog, the dog's going to bite his hand off because he's scared of, and so God's limited in what he can do with us, because the way we see him, we're going to misinterpret everything he says and does. So now he's got this problem. How am I going to show them what I'm like? And he does it through other human beings. He says I have to show them on their level, the natural to the spiritual, because they just can't see otherwise. And that means a level of trust in human beings around us, that they've got a message, that they're teaching truth, etc. So it's a big discussion.
Yes, let's pray anyway and close, because time's up now. Yeah, it's a big discussion.
But it is absolutely fundamental, I think.
So then, do you want to pray, Emma?
Father in heaven, we thank you for this study. We thank you for the experience of Jacob, showing us so many things about ourselves and about what we're going through in this time of trouble. We recognise that we have misunderstood you, that we have made idols in our own image and worshipped them, that we have formed an image in our heads of what you're like, Lord, and it's wrong, and it's so hard to get rid of it. We pray that you would open our minds fully, that you would help us to learn progressively and comprehend the truth for this time about you and about how we're to interact with our fellow human beings. We pray that you would open our eyes fully to see not only our own personal issues, but as a conservative Christian in the movement, that we would understand what's happening, that we would truly be able to be led by you and listen to what you're telling us through the messengers of the hour. And as you deal with us individually, we thank you for your loving care, your watch care, your patience with us over the years, that you do not forsake us and cast us off when we make mistakes, that you're there to pick up the pieces and put us back together again in that sense. We thank you for showing us ourselves. We thank you for all the light that's coming upon us on these issues, and we pray that we would continue to be courageous enough to face those weaknesses and our defects, that you would give us that strength to keep fighting the battle and to recognise how good this message is. Please help us now, guide us through the day with all the tasks we have to do, and Help us, Lord, to rely wholly upon you and to hear you speaking to us through those around us, and to recognise how you work with us. We thank you. We ask these things in the precious name of Jesus. Amen.